When you think of a hero, who comes to mind? Some of you may say Superman.
Bad vibrations?
Others will say Spider-Man.
Sorry, no. My fans expect a certain amount of quippage in every battle.
Some even say Wolverine.
Go fuck yourself.
Despite having drastically different backstories, power sets, and personalities, they all share common traits that classify them as heroes: their need to save others. Yes, these characters often put themselves in harm's way on an almost daily basis in order to rescue their fellow man from danger. They often don't ask for any reward, and will save anyone regardless of their backgrounds and appearances. Not all of them smile, not all of them are wanted, but they still do what they think is right. These represent the modern idea of what a hero should be, the ultimate beacon of good. Now let me ask you the same question with a different context. When you think of a hero, did Denji from ChainsawMan ever pop into your head? Well, of course not. Denji's a bit of a strange case. His series is called ChainsawMan. He has some characteristics of a hero, like a school life and a secret identity. He's hailed by many across the world as a savior. But despite all this, he's nowhere close to what a modern day hero represents. He's selfish, impulsive, vulgar, and a little gross at times. Now before any of you are like,
Okay, now you die.
I have to clarify that I'm not trying to hate on Denji as a character. I'm not going on a nerd-fueled tirade on why Denji destroys the modern ideas of a hero. Instead, I want to analyze some of Denji's actions throughout the story, both good and bad, to gauge whether or not he's a definition of chaotic good. Now, what exactly is chaotic good? Well, by some definitions, chaotic good characters usually intend to do the right thing, but their methods are generally disorganized and often out of sync with the rest of society. This is different from lawful good characters who respect and seek to uphold traditional values of the law, and at the very least, try not to go overboard in their fights. Denji more or less aligns with the chaotic side of the spectrum in three crucial ways: his past, his reckless and impulsive nature, and his iffy morality. Denji's childhood isn't exactly what you'd call a happy one. His mother died when he was at a young age to a heart disease. His father was a drunk that was never really there for him, and was at least implied to be abusive. Even after his father's death, things didn't really go exactly his way. All the debt his father had collected over the years was now forced onto him, and he now has to spend the rest of his life to pay it off. From the sound of things already, Denji's backstory sounds like that of a villain origin story. A neglected child who had nothing and was abused all his life, lashes out at the world and views it all as a sick joke. Typically in hero origin stories, the hero goes through some sort of great tragedy that acts as a catalyst for the transformation. Oftentimes, these catalysts are a reason why these characters don't go down a dark path, and they learn an important lesson from them that helps drive their journey. Denji has some immediate red flags from the start. First of all, Denji's father wasn't killed by loan sharks or his alcoholism, but by Denji himself. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it wasn't. Either way, we don't know what was going through his head at the time, but it undeniably left an impression in his mind. Second of all, like I mentioned before, Denji was then forced to take on all his father's debt,
or else he'd be killed and harvested for all his organs.
So Denji, who never had the opportunities of other children, like education, proper meals, friends, and even young love, now has to fight man-eating devils with the threat of injury or death for a measly salary, all in order to pay off a debt that wasn't even his to begin with. Again, this horrible salary not only forces Denji to eat a loaf of bread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but he often has to work multiple jobs and sell his body parts and organs for a little extra cash. Despite this torment, the only reason he hadn't snapped was because of his trusty companion, who keeps him grounded. But if the abusive home life, death of his parents, debt, poverty, and life-threatening work wasn't enough, then the fatal heart disease he inherited from his mother surely would break his spirit. Funny, probably the only thing he has of his mother will be what does him in the end. It's like the world was playing a sick joke on him. But after everything he's been through, everything he's done for his own freedom, he was eventually sacrificed to the zombie devil by his debt collectors. So with some perspective, you'd think Denji would become a villain, a man who cares about nothing but his own self-satisfaction, simply because he never got any of that for himself. Well, all those negative traits are still present. He is in fact selfish and relentlessly pursues what he wants, even if they're a bit shallow. The only reason he didn't become a calamity to the world was because of a small amount of compassion he learned from being with Pochita. But these contradictory elements help inform certain aspects of his strange heroic nature. When it comes to collateral damage and the safety of bystanders, heroes often try their best to do as little property damage and civilian casualties as possible, and often go out of their way to save the lives in the middle of battle. Yeah, Denji doesn't really do that. He recklessly jumps headfirst into battle with no regard for the collateral damage he causes.
He's your favorite fearless hero.
In fact, because he's not exactly the smartest guy out there, he'll do bizarre and dangerous things which could potentially lead to problems down the line, such as when he lit himself on fire and started throwing around exploding cars. As long as he gets the job done, who cares how many buildings you topple along the way?
Mr. President, how much money and property damage did Chainsaw Man's fight with the Capybara Devil cause?
Over $1.2 trillion.
I wouldn't exactly call Denji an evil person. He on many occasions has shown compassion to those around him, but he's definitely a far cry from characters like Superman and Spider-Man. Does Denji go out of his way to save people? Some will say yes, as there's many examples of him throwing himself in harm's way to save others, and he does often warn people of incoming danger. There's one problem. The only one he goes out of his way to protect are women, when he really shouldn't be. Okay, look, that's not what I mean. It's pretty evident that Denji has a fondness for women. One of his life goals was to get a girlfriend, and he has had some logical short-term goals, so it's obvious he has interest in the members of the opposite sex. It's been stated that Denji only really saves women, which becomes evident when you look at his actions here. He didn't at all consider or care for the life of the man inside, and he very well could have died here. Well, then that just means that Denji's an ally to women everywhere, right? Well, not really. Oftentimes, Denji only really does good deeds, expecting a reward from it. He agreed to fight the Gun Devil because of the prospects of going on a date with Makima. Does this mean he wouldn't have done any of this stuff without a reward? Well, not necessarily, but they do help nudge him in a certain direction. Remember, this is a man who hadn't even gotten the simple things in life, and has constantly been used by others. He'd obviously want something in return, for a bit of insurance. There is one pressing issue about Denji that needs to be addressed. How much does he truly care about human life? Now this question stems from a chapter in Chainsaw Man Part 2, where Denji is given two choices. Whether to save a car full of people, or one schoolboy. Now this dilemma has been used a lot in superhero media, with the hero often managing to save both parties. But in Chainsaw Man, Denji chooses neither.
And both parties end up suffering brutal deaths.
Now who did Denji save instead? Well, it's in fact a random cat who was dangling off the side of a building. Now I'm not trying to say a cat's life is less important than a human life, but Denji didn't even hesitate or think for a second about the lives in front of him, and when it was all said and done, he didn't think about their deaths either. Denji has a great love for animals, based on his past history with Pochita and Power, and his eagerness to prioritize them over human lives does paint Denji as a bit of a villain. When dozens of people were killed by the falling devil, Denji was more concerned with the fact that they stole groceries. Now obviously he cares for humans as well. In the fight with the doll devil, he was afraid of the idea of killing other people, like it was something he'd never do. But based on what Quincy told him about ignorance being bliss, I like to think that Denji shuts himself off from the consequences of his actions, and no longer thought much about who'd be caught up in his antics. Now you'd think that the media and social media would be on his ass in seconds, just like how we cancel people for every little thing in real life. But for whatever reason, they praise every single one of his actions, even if it results in the deaths of many.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
They seem blinded by the idea of having a hero, someone out there who will save them in their time of need against the devils. Because frankly, the contract devil system that's been used up until this point kinda sucks, which I made a video about in the past, by the way. Hell, even the devil hunters allow him to continue his superhero fantasies. Because of this, Denji's free to cause property damage and civilian casualties as much as he wants, as long as the devil is eventually defeated. Denji's the hero with no heart. He could definitely be considered on the side of good, but his actions and methods definitely paint him as random and chaotic in how he does things. Perhaps it's because of his horrible upbringing. Perhaps it's because he has the heart of the Chainsaw Devil, who's also chaotic and random in nature. It can't be denied that Denji has saved many lives over his time as Chainsaw Man. It would be ridiculous to call him an ideal hero.